Here's the strange thing about the behaviors that keep most people financially stuck. They don't feel like problems. They feel like normal. They feel like Tuesday. They feel like what everyone does, because in most cases, everyone around you actually is doing them too. That's what makes them so effective at draining wealth. Not that they're dramatic, not that they're reckless, but that they blend in completely with the texture of an ordinary financial life. Over the years, behavioral economists, financial researchers, and psychologists have mapped these behaviors with uncomfortable precision. And what they keep finding is the same result. The gap between people who build financial stability and people who don't almost never comes down to income, intelligence, or willpower. It comes down to 7 patterns. Quiet ones, invisible ones, ones that feel perfectly reasonable in the moment and add up to something significant over time. Today, we're going to look at all 7. Not to assign blame, these patterns are structural, not moral, but because the only way out of a pattern is to see it clearly first. Why invisible is the problem in behavioral science? There's a concept called financial blind spots, areas of our money behavior that we genuinely cannot see without deliberate effort, not because we're avoidant, but because the human brain is wired to automate routine decisions and move its attention elsewhere. This automation is incredibly useful. It's why you don't have to consciously decide to breathe. But applied to money, it means that a significant portion of your financial decisions happen on autopilot in patterns set months or years ago, running quietly in the background while your conscious attention is elsewhere. A study from the University of Southern California found that roughly 40% of daily actions, including a large share of financial ones, are habits, not conscious decisions. Which means that for most people, nearly half of what they do with money isn't chosen. It's executed. The 7 behaviors we're going to cover today all share one characteristic. They're invisible precisely because they've been automated. They don't feel like decisions. They feel like life. Understanding them won't change them automatically. But it's the necessary first step. You cannot consciously redesign a system you can't see. Reactive saving, the leftover problem, the first behavior, is the one that's most universal, cuts across every income level, and gets disguised as responsible bill paying. It's called reactive saving. And it works like this. Money arrives, obligations get covered, life gets lived, and saving is what happens with whatever's left at the end of the month. The problem is that in most households, at most income levels, nothing is left at the end of the month. Not because the person is irresponsible, but because spending, by its nature, expands to fill available space. It is not a personal failing. It is a behavioral law as reliable as gravity. Parkinson's law, applied to money, expenditure rises to meet income. The research on this is unambiguous. A University of Chicago study found that households who saved proactively, who moved money to savings before discretionary spending, began saved consistently, regardless of income level. Households who saved reactively from what was left, saved erratically, and, on average, significantly less over time. The structural fix is not about discipline. It's about sequencing. Pay yourself first is a phrase so common it's become a cliché, which is unfortunate, because the mechanics underneath it are genuinely powerful. When a savings transfer is automated and executes the same day as a paycheck, it exits the decision space entirely. The question is never, should I save this month? The question has already been answered, structurally, at the system level. The spendable balance simply reflects what's available after savings, not before. The behavior doesn't change through willpower. The sequence changes. And the sequence does the work. Subscription blindness, the second behavior, is a product of the modern economy specifically, and it's become one of the most effective slow drains on household budgets in history. Subscription blindness is the near total failure to track recurring charges, and the psychological quirk that makes small, regular payments feel like they barely exist. Here's the behavioral mechanics. A one-time purchase of $120 registers, clearly. The brain processes it as a significant transaction. But a $12 monthly charge, recurring automatically, barely clears the awareness threshold, even though over 12 months they are identical. This is called the pain of paying. Research by Carnegie Mellon professor Dresden Prelek established that financial transactions that are more visible, more immediate, and more clearly connected to consumption produce more psychological friction, and therefore more spending restraint. Subscriptions are specifically designed to minimize all three of those dimensions. They're automatic, so there's no moment of active payment. They're small, so they don't feel significant. And they're often decoupled from actual use you pay, whether you log in or not. The average American household, according to a 2023 West Monroe survey, carries between 12 and 17 active subscriptions and estimates their spending at roughly a third of the actual amount. The gap between what people think they spend on subscriptions and what they actually spend is one of the most reliable findings in consumer finance research. The audit is the intervention. A one-time, complete review of every recurring charge, nothing excluded, no assumptions made, typically reveals somewhere between 2 and 5 subscriptions that the person had either forgotten entirely or is actively not using. This is not a revolutionary financial strategy. It's maintenance. But the reason it keeps showing up in financial research is that most people never do it. Decision fatigue, spending the third behavior, connects directly to the way the brain manages energy, and it explains why so many people spend in patterns that don't match their stated intentions. Decision fatigue is a well-documented psychological phenomenon in which the quality of decisions deteriorates as a person makes more decisions over the course of a day. It was first documented extensively in a study of Israeli judges, who were found to grant parole at significantly higher rates early in the day and after breaks, and deny it at much higher rates late in sessions, regardless of the merits of the cases. The brain, having depleted its decision-making resources, defaults to the path of least resistance. Applied to spending, the pattern looks like this. You exercise strong financial judgment throughout the morning. You bring lunch, decline the expensive coffee, think twice about the impulse purchase. By evening, your decision-making capacity is significantly depleted, and the $45 takeout order, the late-night online shopping, the "I'll deal with it tomorrow" approach to a budget you should review these become the defaults. Research from Columbia Business School found that a disproportionate share of impulsive, regretted financial decisions cluster in the late afternoon and evening, not because people are less committed to their financial goals then, but because the cognitive resources required to override impulse are depleted. The structural fix here is not to try harder at night. It's to move the important financial decisions, transfers, reviews, major purchase choices to the morning, when decision capacity is at its peak. And to reduce evening financial friction by removing opportunity, deleting payment information from one-click shopping, unsubscribing from retailer marketing emails, introducing a deliberate pause between impulse and execution. The goal is not perfect discipline. The goal is to make it structurally harder to spend on impulse at the moment you're least equipped to resist it. Comparison spending, the fourth behavior, is perhaps the oldest driver of unnecessary spending, but it's been given unprecedented fuel by the social media environment of the last decade. Comparison spending is spending driven not by need, preference, or even desire, but by a perceived gap between your visible lifestyle and someone else's. The underlying psychology was documented by economist Thorstein Veblen more than a century ago. His concept of conspicuous consumption described how spending serves a signaling function, communicating social status as much as satisfying utility. What's changed in the last 10 years is the scale and speed of the comparison triggers. The average person now encounters, daily, curated representations of hundreds of people's lives, selectively edited to emphasize the aspirational, the expensive, and the new. A friend's kitchen renovation. A colleague's vacation. A former classmate's car. Each individual exposure seems minor. Cumulatively, they establish a social reference point that is, for most people, financially unreachable, and they do it invisibly. The behavioral research on this is concerning. A study published in the Journal of Consumer Research found that brief exposure to social media content depicting aspirational lifestyles measurably reduced financial self-control in the following purchasing decisions across income levels, ages, and financial literacy scores. Financial literacy doesn't protect you from this mechanism. The effect operates below the level where knowledge intervenes. The intervention that works is environmental, not intellectual. Curation of what you're exposed to, unfollowing accounts that consistently trigger comparison. Intentionally replacing aspirational content with content that reflects your actual values has been shown to reduce comparison-driven spending without requiring ongoing discipline. You're not fighting the desire, you're reducing the trigger. The financial avoidance loop, the fifth behavior, is the one most likely to feel personally familiar, and the one most reliably described by people as a source of low-grade, ongoing anxiety. Financial avoidance is the pattern of not looking at the numbers, not reviewing accounts, not checking statements, not sitting down with income and expenses in the same place at the same time. It looks like procrastination. It functions like fear. The behavioral mechanism is well understood. When a financial situation feels uncertain or uncomfortable, reviewing it precisely activates the brain's threat response. The numbers feel dangerous. Not looking at them feels like a form of safety. If you don't confirm the worst, it hasn't fully arrived. The cruelty of avoidance is that it creates a feedback loop in the wrong direction. By not reviewing the numbers, the person accumulates more uncertainty. More uncertainty increases anxiety. Increased anxiety makes the idea of reviewing even more threatening. The threshold for looking gets higher as time passes, not lower. And the longer the avoidance runs, the more it affects actual financial outcomes, because problems that could have been addressed early become problems that require emergency responses. A study from Novarica Research found that financial avoidance is consistently associated with higher credit card balances, more missed payment penalties, and lower rates of retirement contribution, not because avoiders earn less, but because the avoidance itself has material financial consequences. The research-backed intervention for avoidance is radical reduction of entry barriers. Not a full financial review, a 2-minute weekly check-in. One number. One account. One question. Is this higher or lower than last week? The goal is to reduce the threat threshold, not to solve everything at once. Regular, low-stakes engagement dismantles the avoidance loop more effectively than any single comprehensive review. Small and consistent beats, large and occasional. Always, the sunk cost trap, the sixth behavior, is one where basic economics and human psychology point in opposite directions, and psychology wins, consistently, to the significant cost of the people running the pattern. The sunk cost fallacy is the tendency to continue investing time, money, or energy into something based on what has already been spent on it, rather than on its current or future value. In pure economic terms, a cost that has already been paid should have no influence on future decisions. The money is gone. The only relevant question is whether continuing produces more value than stopping. Economically, past investment is irrelevant. Psychologically, it is extraordinarily relevant. The reason is loss aversion, a core finding in Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky's Nobel-winning research on prospect theory. Humans feel losses approximately twice as intensely as equivalent gains. Abandoning something you paid for feels like confirming a loss. Continuing even at ongoing cost, even when the value is gone, feels like keeping the loss potential alive. Like it might still work out. This plays out in household finances in dozens of ways. The gym membership held for months after you stopped going. The streaming service kept active because of one show you might watch someday. The service contract that doesn't serve your needs, but has 3 months left on it. The business idea continued beyond its reasonable timeline because of how much has already been put in. The aggregate annual cost of sunk cost behavior in the average household isn't dramatic in any single line item. Across all of them, it tends to be several hundred to over $1,000 a year money, flowing toward things that have already failed to deliver value, because stopping feels worse than continuing. The frame shift that research supports. Instead of asking, how much did I spend on this? Ask, if I hadn't already bought this, would I pay for it today? If the answer is no, you have your answer. Asymmetric financial effort, the seventh behavior, is the one that produces the most frustrating ratio of effort to outcome in personal finance, and it's driven by a genuine quirk in how the brain weights financial decisions. Asymmetric financial effort is the pattern of spending significant energy optimizing small decisions while large, high-leverage financial variables go unreviewed for years. This is not irrationality. It's the brain doing what it's designed to do. Prioritize visible, concrete, Immediate wins over abstract, deferred, harder to measure ones. The coupon saves $1.50, and you see it immediately. Refinancing a mortgage at a better rate saves tens of thousands of dollars over time. But the payoff is slow, the process is complex, and there's no satisfying moment of immediate confirmation. The behavioral finance term for this is optimization mismatch, allocating the most decision-making energy to the decisions with the smallest financial impact, and the least energy to the decisions that actually move the number. Researchers at the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau found that the average household overpays through inertia alone by an estimated $800 to $1,200 annually across insurance, banking fees, unused services, and suboptimal debt rates. Not through bad decisions, but through the simple failure to revisit decisions made years ago that no longer reflect current market conditions. The returns on high-leverage financial reviews are extraordinary relative to the time invested. An afternoon reviewing your car insurance, your phone plan, your bank account rates, and any existing debt terms will almost always yield more financial improvement than months of micro-optimization on small purchases. The goal isn't to stop caring about the small stuff, it's to make sure the big stuff is getting proportional attention. The common thread: 7 behaviors, all invisible in their own way, all running on autopilot, all costing real money in real households, at every income level. Reactive saving, which waits for something that never comes. Subscription blindness, which lets small recurring costs accumulate unseen. Decision fatigue spending, which drains willpower before the high-stakes moment arrives. Comparison spending, which builds a reference point you were never meant to afford. Financial avoidance, which lets anxiety compound alongside the balance. The sunk cost trap, which keeps money flowing toward things that stopped working. And asymmetric effort, which gets the energy allocation exactly backwards. None of these are income problems. None of them respond to shame. None of them require you to become a different person with different values. They require you to see the pattern, name it, and make one structural change, not a discipline change. A system change that removes the behavior from the daily decision space entirely. Awareness is not the destination, but it is always, without exception, the starting point. You cannot redesign what you cannot see. Now you can see it. Drop it in the comments. I'm genuinely curious which one. And if you want to go deeper on any of these, several of them have their own full videos on this channel. Subscribe if you want more of this. No hype, just the research, applied clearly. See you in the next one.